Everybody. So we're going to do the drone security risks. So this is the dry run for the exponential conference next week. So the Mike, can you mute yourself? It's got a lot of background noise. Thank you. Essentially what happened is about 10 years ago, we were doing some mobile apps, and I started to do a lot of audits on mobile apps. We got really into it. I wrote a couple of books, decompiling Android, decompiling Java before that. Lots of articles, just really interested in how to pull apart an Android APK. And then when somebody asked us to do an audit of a drone app, a drone mobile app, it became obvious to me that, hey, there's all these SDKs that you can play with. And that's actually how we got into drones in the first place. I've been doing audits on mobile apps for, like I said, 10 years, and drones probably for about 5. So one of the things that I thought that was really useful in the past was OWASP, which is the Open Web Application Security Projects, OWASP.org. We'll talk about it in a second. They have a really amazing thing for mobile apps. And even back in the day, so when we talk about 2014, I was using the top 10 mobile risks from 2014, and it was a really good way of figuring out where to start on an audit, what kind of template to use for just whatever the report is, but also how to do red team pen testing. So that's penetration testing, pull the thing apart, see if you can find whatever keys, whatever credentials, or whatever information on where the data is going. So really that's OWASP has been huge for me in trying to understand how to do proper audits. And then for when we started doing stuff on the drones, I was thinking, well, this is kind of silly because there is nothing in OWASP for drones. So I contacted them a few months ago, said, hey, I'd really love to do a top 10 mobile risks. And that's kind of why we're here now. So basically what I'm trying to do is get it's not going to be a top 10 risks, because basically what they've said is it's kind of a process you have to go through. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to do a cheat sheet. And that's fine by me if I can just get the information up there. I also, I have other people who are fellow travelers. So there's Rudy Mendoza from Dark Wolf. There's also David Kovar from Ursa, and then because he's really specialized on the back end, and also some of the forensic stuff. So I thought, well, there's all these people that I know. We really should get together and try and come up with some good ideas. So, and then we also have Benjamin Sugg, who's from CNA, and he's working with us on a tool at the moment, which is basically going to, for some of the major drones, the USA ones, not the DJI ones, it just sets some of the default passwords so that if there's a first responder or a police person who wants to use them, or anybody who wants to use them, that they don't need an IT department. They can just, run our little app, which runs on a Raspberry Pi to reset all the passwords to something, and then we send you an email and make sure that you're a bit more secure. So that's really what's going on next week. So this is kind of, I'm trying to get some sort of feedback, because one of the things that OWASP did say is open up to a wider audience. Yes, you've got some people out there who know what's going on in the industry, but we really want as many people to contribute as we can, so we get most of the information. So this is the first part of it. So whatever feedback I get on this, we'll kind of redo what the white paper is that we gave to AUVSI for the Exponential Conference. And then after the conference, whatever feedback we get from the panel, we're basically going to redo the thing and then start that as the first draft of the cheat sheet and talk to OWASP and get it done. So that's really kind of explaining why I'm here. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention is the big news is, of course, is Exponential on next week, but the DJI Dock 2 is coming out, and I think that's going to have a significant impact on lots of different industries, because you can basically get a dock now for about 14 grand. So that's kind of a fraction of what it was before, maybe half. Certainly for, I think the old DJI dock was it's also much bigger. It's like 100 kilograms. This one's 30 kilograms. So it's pretty cool. And then next month, the talk is going to be, we're going to continue on the, fingers crossed, we're going to continue on the security side. So there's Nick Alex, who's got this damn vulnerable drone. So he's got a drone hacking simulator, which is really cool, because a lot of the stuff that I learned when I was doing OWASP is that they had lots of tools to hack Android apps and iOS apps. So that's really how you learn how to do the pen testing. So I'm looking forward to that too as well. So OWASP, like I said, it's the Open Web Application Security Project. It's been around for the mobile one's been around for at least 10 years, the web more than that. And then so basically what, it's like if it's a mobile app, you basically have the only really things that you have to worry about is whatever's on the client, which is the mobile, and then whatever's on the back end, which is the cloud. So you got kind of some kind of similarity with what we have here. So we have the drone, and then we also have like the back end, we have the cloud too as well, because there's so much information that comes from the drone. And a lot of times what you'll do is the logs will go up into the cloud. So no matter how secure your drone is, what are you doing after the fact is also going to be an issue. So we'll talk about that too as well. But these are the basic projects that I would go after. So OWASP.org, and I'd look at those and say, how am I gonna start doing an audit? How do I even comprehend what the domain is, what the universe is, what are the areas that I need to attack first to see if I can do it. And back in the day, it usually took 5 or 10 minutes no kidding, to find something wrong with an Android app. iOS a little bit more difficult because you can't really reverse engineer it, but definitely with Android, people were not obfuscating the code. People were basically trying to get their apps to market as quick as possible and not doing anything with security. And we kind of had the same issue on the drone side, where lots of people are trying to get it. VC is funding a lot of what's going on. And security is often the last thing that people think about when they're trying to get everything out. So the goal here is to create a cheat sheet, which we're going to put up certainly before the end of the year to try and get stuff going. So here's an example of the web top 10. So it's I'm not going to go through this too much because...
Sorry, are you supposed to be showing some slides? Because I'm just seeing the
oh my God,
the meeting screen.
That's what he did. See,
I would have said something earlier, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I'm really trying to show it. Okay, let's go back again. Well, anyway, to be honest, actually, you're not really missing something, because all I did before was just, here's the agenda. Here's OWASP. So here's basically, thanks, Eric. You're the best. I owe you a beer. So I'll get a few at Agile Beyond. I'm sure you're going to be at that. So the OWASP top 10, this is the web one. I'm not going to go through this too much because it's not really my area. There's so many tools that you can get to do the web stuff that basically you can automate this. But the mobile one really has gone on to be something pretty incredible. So you have, basically there's, it used to be just the same as this, where you'd have 10 things, and then they kind of break it down into different areas. But also they give you a lot more information. So they're saying, testing local storage for sensitive data. They have level 1, level 2, depending on whether it's a financial app or healthcare app, or if it's just, kind of like your own app that you just want to make sure it's secure. So and if you go in, let me just see if I can open it up. I have it on my PC here. Okay. Nope, I can't find it. But if you go to if you click on this, basically what it'll do is it takes you to the OWASP area. I'm going to see if I can get it over here. We have time. Mobile application security. So if we open their website, basically they have 2 parts. They've got, so this is where I really want to go, but we're miles away from it. So we have our checklist, which is just a spreadsheet. And then if you go into this, basically,
so we're still just seeing your slide. Sorry.
Oh, do it again. Okay, share this tab instead. Here we go. So this is the OWASP mobile application security. So basically there is 2 parts to it. So you have the security standard, the testing guide, which is really what I'm after. So it basically tells you all the different things that you can do, all the different tests, goes through storage, crypto, authentication, network platform code, resilience, privacy. So all the things, if you're going to store something, how you test it, so what test you need to do, gives you an overview of the things that you need to be looking at. So this is pretty detailed. So somebody who doesn't really have any experience in pen testing or in writing secure code can basically go through this and see, what's going on. So have you done stupid stuff like, are you using a key to encrypt whatever it is you're trying to send over to the back end. Are you using a symmetric key? Are you putting the symmetric key in the code? So it's that kind of thing that this kind of helps you with, and gets you really to a very significant level of information to be able to make sure that you're doing what the most important thing is, in order to keep your stuff safe. So that's really what my goal is, to be able to get there. So let me make sure that I'm sharing the right tab so I don't have to worry about. Yep. Okay. So I'm about Eric telling me off again. So this is an example of a cheat sheet. So the cheat sheet is a lot simpler than what we have, which we just saw in our security checklist. It's just giving you basic information about here's the things you really need to do. So there are different versions for lots of different things, which are, so the ones that I would use would be CI/CD. What do I need to do for CI/CD? What do I need to do for Docker, Kubernetes? So, I use Docker a lot. I'm not 100% sure about what I need to do for security on that. So basically what I do is come here and then make sure that I kind of bone up on what the information is to not make any stupid mistakes. So that's 100% the goal here, is to try and get there. So I'm going to talk about the drones in particular now, because in the drone space, I really feel that there's lots of information that's out there that people kind of know about, but unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be anything that's kind of, I feel, written down that's good enough to be able to give to a developer to say, here's the things that we need you to take care of. So we get interns coming in all the time. The interns, after they come back 2 or 3 years, they're employees. So how do we teach them to make sure that they're writing much more secure code for the apps they're writing on drones, or if we're putting together a rover, or we're putting together our own custom drone, because we do custom drones too as well. If we're doing stuff like the GCS that a lot of people use as Q ground control, how do I make sure that that's secure? All the different, there's so many different elements that I just want to make a first stab at writing this down to make sure that we have most of the things covered. And like I said, anybody who's got any input, wants to add anything, 100%, please let me know. So this is, I took this from the CISA. They just have something about how to secure your drone. It's very basic, but it has a really good picture about what are the different elements. So we have the flight controller. So transmit commands to the receiver via electronic signals to perform functions such as controlling speed. So flight controller would be, the orange cube. We have our lots of different sensors. So we have GPS. Obviously, there's lots of things going on with GPS in Ukraine at the moment about people denying GPS. So what can we do to help that? We have the GCS itself. Really, that's where a lot of the software applications that we write tend to be custom applications using the manufacturer's SDK. And a lot of what's going on there really is that's my focus. That's really my area of interest in making sure that they're secure. So, and like I said, that's how we got into drones in the first place. We did an audit of a drone app, didn't realize that there was SDKs that you could write your own custom apps, and scroll forward 5 or 6 years later, and that's probably 95% of our work at the moment. So we have software firmware. So what can you do with the firmware? We'll talk about a little bit. So the firmware would be what makes the drone run. So for example, on the USA type drones, you would have PX4 firmware, or you would have RG Pilot firmware. So how can you make sure that that firmware is really legit, needs to be what it's supposed to be? Also, we're putting in here some software. So if there's some software, same again, if we have a mobile app that's kind of hooked to the drone, or on a laptop, not necessarily on the GCS, what can we do to make sure that that software is true as well? And one of the things that I have heard is that people are, as they get better at the security on drones, so they're starting to lock down the stuff that's happening with the GCS, any external software. And one of the ways in that I hear is the sensors. So cameras typically will have a website that's associated with the camera. So that's a really good way of actually backing into the drone itself by just whatever cameras you've bought. You may not necessarily be thinking about, that's a way to gain access to the drone, because the camera's got its own website, and then you get into the website, and then you can get out to a shell and then do all sorts of damage. The first hack that I ever did back in the day was there used to be a drone called the 3DR Solo. It's no longer made, from Chris Anderson and many others. And it was known to have a default password. So one of our favorite things to do was to get the new employees to telnet onto the server, onto the Linux terminal, which was in the 3DR Solo, log in as root, and then start killing processes till the drone would fall out of the sky. So really, that's the worst case scenario. I put together. I'm trying to narrow this down because I know that there's going to be a bit of crossover in some of the things that I've done, but I've kind of taken this from lots of different people and lots of different sources. So I'm kind of trying to see if I can get this down to something a bit more manageable. I think we're up to 23. If I can get it down to about 15 before I put the cheat sheet out, I think that's going to be really the way to go. So I'm going to talk about each of these individually, what they mean, what the risks are, and what the mitigations are. Mostly, it's a lot of what we've just shown here, but this is each of these different things create their own areas. The thing that is missing from this picture, I got to say, is the back end. So a lot of times when we develop an app, it's just like any other mobile app. It's got a back end. So we're talking to a back end server. So we're talking via REST API to whatever's on the back end. Usually it's Amazon. So you have all the issues about the S3 buckets. You got to make sure that everything, your credentials are in there properly. You're not putting the credentials in the code so that somebody can just gain access to your S3 bucket. So it's not just this drone cheat sheet that you have to worry about. You also have to worry about certainly from the mobile app. If you're going to put a mobile app there, you got to look at the mobile app top 10 too as well, and you got to look at the cloud top 10 to make sure that you're doing, and also make sure that you're looking at any network top 10s too as well, to make sure that you're sending the information kind of in a secure fashion. Anyway, so this is the 23 items that we have. Just going to go through them. So we have insecure communication links. So the risk is, they're going to do it the same format each time. So the risk is, I'll give you an example. Data transmitted of the drone's communication links, so that's by RF, radio frequency, or Wi-Fi, can be intercepted or tampered with due to weak encryption or lack of secure protocols. So for example, if you're talking over Wi-Fi, a lot of times it's just not encrypted at all. So you can gain access to whatever the information is that's going across the pipe to the drone. So you could use strong encryption standards and secure the communication protocols, validate the security of the RF links, and implement measures against eavesdropping and data manipulation. We used to have great fun taking the data from a camera, for example. So the camera on the drone on the 3DR, I think it was the 3DR, we could basically put one of those NTSC old school TV, little mini TVs, and you could basically pick up the signal that was coming from the camera. So somebody else could basically eavesdropping on what you're doing. So an example of this going wrong is that at one of the DEF CON hacks, there was a demonstration where they took over control of the drone because it was over an unencrypted Wi-Fi connection, pretty similar to what I was talking about with the 3DR Solo, where you basically just connect to it and then just log in as root because everybody knew what the root password was, and then just start killing processes till the drone fell out of the sky. So weak authentication mechanism. So the same as any mobile app, you got to make sure that you got decent logins. When people are flying their drones, they don't want to be logging in all the time. So there's that real trade-off about making sure that the session expires after a while, making sure that you don't have 4-character pins that people could break pretty easily. So or 4-number pins. You just got to make sure that you've got the same type of thing that you would expect on any mobile app or any web app to make sure that people can't log in. So have better authentication mechanisms, have strong password policies, and use multi-factor authentication where possible. The example I found of this was an off-the-shelf drone was found to accept any command from an unauthenticated user because the default setting did not require a password for access. So there are certain drones out there that just basically don't have any passwords. This is where one of the projects that we're doing for the FAA, so the FAA, the BAA, and we're working on this with the CNA. That's a lot of 3-letter acronyms there. But anyway, so the FAA brought out a request for if people could help with some of the security for the drones. for the well, not really Blue UAS drones, just USA drones in general. And so we have a tool which is called BFDI, which stands for brute force breaking into drones. So what we've basically done is comb through numerous manuals for different drones, and we just have a little Python script that will go out and see if it can log into drones. And then if it can, it will change the drone, will change the default password to something that is not default, and then email you what the password is. So we're doing it for Teal drones, we're doing it for Bobby Watts Prism drones, and 3 or 4 others that I can't think of off the top of my head. So, okay, weak authentication mechanisms. Firmware and software vulnerabilities. So unencrypted firmware. So if the firmware is unencrypted, or it doesn't have a checksum that you can check to make sure that it's what it's supposed to be, so that can lead to unauthorized modifications, exploitation. So you got to secure the firmware update process, use encryption, and perform regular security audits of the software and firmware. One of the things that I really dislike about the DJI apps at the moment is, for whatever reason, and I'm not getting into the politics, for whatever reason, you cannot download a DJI app from the Google Play Store or iOS. Basically, what you're doing is you're going outside of the Play Store environment to be able to download it from a third-party website, from the DJI website, which just strikes me as being just inherently insecure from the start. So you're not going through all the usual Google Play checks. So just that worries me. So it always has. So I don't know what's going on, but just that inherently, whatever hair I have left on the top of my head, just that really makes me quite worried. Okay, so here's an example of some of the issues that happened with this. So there was a discovery of buffer overflow vulnerability in a popular drone's firmware, which allowed attackers to crash the drone mid-flight. So just make sure that if you are downloading the firmware, that it's encrypted when it comes over the line, and then when it gets installed, that there's no potential gap for somebody to be able to mess with the firmware before it actually gets installed. So because it's a drone, there's lots of other stuff that can happen. So there's a physical security component too as well. So physical access to drones or their components can lead to unauthorized use, data theft, and hardware tampering. So a lot of people think about drones just when they're actually using it on the day, but where is the drone afterwards? Is it stored securely in a room? If it's not, have you left the SD card in there? If you've left the SD card in there, can people take out the SD card and see where you've flown, or get whatever information that you have in there, or can they start messing with your hardware? And then the mitigation is implement tamper detection mechanisms, secure physical interfaces like USB ports, and restrict physical access to critical components. So you could basically take a malicious USB device, and if you have an onboard computer, you could do whatever you would do with a USB device on any computer. So there's lots of times when we're building systems, we're doing them right now that has a Jetson Nano. So it's taking a USB all the time. So there's no reason why a hacker couldn't exploit that if you don't secure the drone in the first place. Okay, we did, just before we started this, we were talking about insecure supply chain. So the idea here is that compromised components from suppliers can introduce hidden vulnerabilities, and then the mitigation is perform thorough security vetting of suppliers, use trusted sources for hardware and software components, and monitor the integrity of the supply chain. So as part of an audit of a drone, really you have to do like a hardware teardown to make sure that you can see where all the different components are coming from. Make sure that they're from trusted sources, make sure that they're not rebadged so that they appear to be from Mexico, for example, is one of the things we're talking about before we started this meetup, and where they're not really coming from Mexico, they're coming from somebody else, from somewhere else. So you got to make sure that you have your supply chain is tight, so you know exactly where everything's being manufactured before it gets to your drone. Inadequate privacy protection. I think some of these are definitely kind of overlapping. So drones collecting sensitive data without proper safeguards can lead to privacy breaches. So ensure compliance with privacy laws, implement data minimization practices, and secure any collected data both in transit and at rest. So, for example, if you're doing a commercial survey that may have, bled into some of the houses around where the survey is happening, and then you get some personal activities of individuals at home, so you're basically breaching their privacy. So just make sure that whatever you're doing, that whatever data is limited to whatever area. So there needs to be some processes in place to say if you're like, for example, we talked about the DJI dock or any of the dock systems. If it's flying, make sure that it's flying in the area it's supposed to be, and then it's not 6 feet into the neighbor's garden too as well, or the neighboring commercial area. Network service vulnerabilities and network services on drones and ground control systems can have vulnerabilities that allow unauthorized access or denial of service attacks. So you got to harden the network services, perform regular vulnerability scanning, and implement network segmentation and firewalls. So just like anything else, you need to make sure that, for example, the GCS that we use a lot is running Android 7. So it's an Android tablet. Want to make sure that that Android tablet is locked down as much as it possibly can. What's going on the tablet? Are there other apps installed in there? It's not just drone apps that leak data. There's lots of apps on your phone that leaks data. So is there something there that can gain access to what you're doing? So make sure that you have the proper firewalls, the proper vulnerability scanning on whatever hardware that you're using for the to run the software, the GCS, which is the ground control system to fly the drone in the first place. Okay. Unsecured third-party components. So using vulnerable third-party software libraries and components can compromise drone security. So keep third-party components up to date, conduct security reviews of all third-party code used in drone operations. I'm not going to pick on Q ground control, but I'm just going to use it as a possible example. So Q ground control is used by a lot of the non-DJI drones. And many people, what they'll do is they'll use a version of Q ground control and they'll rebrand it with their logo and their colors. And Q ground control has been improved all the time. It's just gone through some major updates for a new version of the QT, which is what you use to write the app in the first place. So if you're using a branded app, you're not getting the benefits of whatever the improvements have happened with Q ground control because you're kind of out of date with whatever the latest version is. So I often wonder if that's going to introduce anything in, there's a lot of libraries that are used underneath the hood for Q ground control, and they're being updated all the time. So just make sure that you're using the latest and greatest for everything that you're using, and whatever open source libraries that you're using that, that they've been scanned by something to make sure that they're secure, like SonarCube. A lack of a secure update mechanism. So the absence of a secure mechanism for updating drone software and firmware can allow attackers to install malicious updates. So this is the same as making sure that your drones are patched, like your network is patched, like your desktop apps, your laptops, everything else needs to be patched for whatever the latest hack that's out there, whatever 0 day. Make sure that you're updating the firmware as soon as you can. For all of the different parts of the drone ecosphere that we have. And then use cryptographic signatures for updates, ensure secure delivery updates, and verify integrity before installation. The example that I have is drone model was recalled after it was found that its firmware could be updated by unauthorized users without verification, allowing the introduction of malicious firmware, which sounds similar to what we said before. Okay, inadequate logging and monitoring. Insufficient monitoring of drone operations can delay the detection of security breaches or operational anomalies. So implement comprehensive logging and monitoring systems and use real-time alerting for suspicious activities. So if, for example, you have delivery drones that don't log the flight paths adequately, there could be an unexpected flight deviation leading to a crash, which could go unnoticed if you don't have the proper logging and monitoring. And logging and monitoring goes across the board. So you're logging for whatever your app is, what are you doing to make sure that you're seeing if your software is crashing, or using something like Crashalytics, Firebase, whatever it is, to see what's going on, and then monitoring of what's actually happening on the day. Are you, is there a way for you to get, is it not only the pilot that's seeing what's happening? You know, is there a, like a drone as a first responder web view that you can see what's going on too as well? Is there a way for somebody to remotely view what's going on, to monitor what's going on, make sure it's secure? Insecure data storage, so sensitive data stored on drones or in the GCS can be accessed if data storage is not secure. So are you encrypting your stored data and implementing strong access controls? And if you're encrypting it, how are you encrypting it? So are you encrypting it with a symmetric key or an asymmetric key? And if you're using a symmetric key, where is that key being stored? Could somebody else get it? So that was the first thing that we always tried on mobile apps back in the day, was to see if we could find the a symmetric encryption key. Oh, the stories I could tell, but anyway, I won't. So a simple problem with this is, like, if a stolen drone's unencrypted SD card would expose sensitive data, which could include all sorts of things like coordinates of strategic interest. If you think about some of the things that were going on with the Garmin's, probably about 5 or 6 years ago now, where the GPS tracker was basically reporting where the Garmin's were, and they were being used on military bases. So, and tracking people where they were running each morning. So make sure that whatever data is being used, first of all, is secure on the drone itself, on the USB, on the SD card, wherever the information is. And also when it gets sent wherever else it's getting sent, make sure that if it's up on an S3 bucket, there are lots of examples on LinkedIn lately about people finding information on S3 buckets where they should not be finding it. I know that the examples were DJI, but that's not to say that everybody else is clear and free. Everybody should be looking to make sure that whatever their data is being stored, that it's being stored securely, because if you are using Amazon credentials and you're putting your credentials in your mobile app, if I can gain access to that, then I can gain access to a lot of what's in your S3 buckets. Spoofing and replay attacks. So risks of GPS spoofing, not so much ADS-B data, that's more airplanes really, or command replay attacks that could mislead or take control of the drone. GPS spoofing is obviously the huge one. So how do you get around the GPS spoofing, all the stuff that's going on? A lot of research that's coming out of Ukraine for GPS spoofing that's happening in a battle, in a war zone. So, you know, really right at the coalface, making sure that they can fly the drones without GPS, using whatever LiDAR, radar. So to be able to get around having problems with somebody GPS spoofing, that's basically putting wrong GPS coordinates or just jamming in to make sure that you can't get in there. So implement anomaly detection, secure GPS protocols, and message authentication. So GPS spoofing, obviously, you can just basically send it to a different location and walk away with the drone. RF interference and jamming, again, this is not just GPS spoofing that's going on in Ukraine. We also have lots of jamming. So drones can be disrupted or controlled through intentional RF interference and jamming. Use frequency hopping, spread, spectrum technologies, and jamming detection systems. Certainly a lot of the DJI drones, they'll use frequency hopping so that somebody can't just target a single frequency, using many of the tools that are out there to be able to hack RF, I think is the one I was thinking off the top of my head, to be able to jam a frequency. So if you're jumping across different frequencies, it's harder for the hacker ref to be actually to follow you to stop the drone from working. Okay, sensor vulnerabilities again. So we would have an altitude sensor. GPS again can be exploited to feed incorrect data. Sensor vulnerabilities I talked about right at the start. Cameras. So cameras a lot of times will have a web that's associated with the camera. So they have a, you know, you can go to a URL and see what you can do with the drone, with the camera, but also sometimes you can break out of that website and see what's going on with the drone itself. So that's one area of entry that should definitely be locked down. So if there's a default password on the website, make sure that that's changed so that it's something different than admin. Okay, validate sensor inputs, use redundant sensor systems to verify data accuracy. And then the example that I have is a drone's altitude sensor was found to be easily manipulated with a simple laser pointer, causing the drone to ascend uncontrollably. Inadequate incident response. So lack of preparedness for handling security incidents affecting drones. So you need to develop and regular update an incident response plan specific to drone operations. So if you don't have an incident response plan in place when a fleet of drones are hacked, so that can result in downtime and uncontrolled drones. So really, it's just about having a process in place that if there is something that goes wrong, not just from a crash perspective, but from a hacking perspective, that that's actually recorded somewhere. So the type of thing would be, a website was hacked and then 6 months later they found out about it. So the same thing on the drones. So the last thing that you want to do is have a drone that's hacked and nobody really finds out about it till it's way too late, till the information's gone, till you're finding your data up on the dark web or other social media websites. Cloud storage and data management vulnerabilities. So inadequate security controls for drone data stored in the cloud. Video logs, images can be leaked to unauthorized access and data breaches. So use encrypted storage solutions. So if you have videos, logs, and images up on S3, if you make them, if they're encrypted at rest, then they're less likely to be hacked. Enforce strong access controls and apply best practices for cloud security. So that would be back to the OWASP Cloud Top 10 would be the first place that I'd start to look at that to make sure that whatever you're doing in the cloud is the right thing. Regularly audit cloud storage and data management practices. There is a thing, there's kind of a difference between what I'm trying to do here and what a lot of the other audits that I see that happens in the drone world. A lot of the audits that happen in the drone world are kind of the difference between blue team and red team. So blue team is you want to make sure that everything's patched on time. Red team is we're going to attack your website or your REST API or whatever it is, or your drone or your mobile app, and try and rip it apart to gain access to areas we're not supposed to be. I'm much more interested in that area than I am in the what are the processes of the people who are actually writing the code. So I've seen a lot of work on that side for are the laptops encrypted? Have they, is the person being logged out after 15 minutes from their laptop or from the desktop? That really, to me, is just, that's more on the blue team side. I'm more on the red team side where I'm trying to attack it. So it's not about, yes, you do have to have the good processes, but we can't forget about the standard red team hacking ability that people can get in and attack all the different things to gain access to drones. Oh, my favorite, OSINT, so open source intelligence data. So something that's kind of overlooked a lot when it comes to security, but is definitely one of the key areas of how people gain access to source code, staging websites, lots of different things. So basically, hackers using public available data, or OSINT as it's called, from LinkedIn, Twitter, and GitHub to gather information in drone development teams, access code or deployment practices. So I'm going to look at whatever company that you're trying to attack or audit. So you see who the developers are that are working there. You find out what they're doing on Twitter, if they're still using Twitter or X, and then find out what their GitHub handle is and see if they have any repos up on GitHub, which may be public, which might give you some information on how they developed what they were developing for the drone. So it sounds like it doesn't happen, but it happens all the time. So you got to implement strict policies on what can be shared publicly by development teams, monitor public data for potential leaks, educate teams on the risk of sharing sensitive information. So there's also social engineering practices that go along with the whole OSN thing. So basically what if you can find out who's working there, if they've got a LinkedIn website, I get it all the time. People send me LinkedIn requests and it's pretty obvious that they don't exist. So it's some nefarious actor from I don't know where who's just trying to connect to me to try and see if there's a way to gain some information. So OSINT, I think, is one of the huge open doors for gaining access to mobile apps and lots of other things. Okay, so I know of several examples where people have used OSINT to gain access to S3 buckets, to gain access to videos and logs. So they're from personal experience, I know that the stuff out there. Okay, end of life and decommissioning risks. So a decommissioned drone, so you sell it to somebody else. So remote ID, seeing a huge amount of drones kind of changing hands on eBay. So you basically people getting rid of their old drones, trying to get rid of their old stock, trying to buy some new stuff, want to make sure that they can support remote ID. So what are you doing with your old drones? Are you leaving any data on them? Are you selling them with SD cards still there? We buy drones all the time and we find all sorts of stuff in there. Are you selling the tablets that you were using, the Android tablets that you're using with the drones? Are you selling them online too as well? Is the data still there? Did you wipe them? Did you encrypt, decrypt, encrypt again to make sure that the data's gone? Because there's lots of forensics that you can do on old Android tablets and get back lots of information that you shouldn't be able to. So you got to make sure that you're sanitizing the data as much as you can, so that whoever is getting the hardware after you is not going to gain access to to data they shouldn't be. The obvious thing being is somebody just selling a drone and then just leaving an SD card in it. Happens all the time. So just make sure that you have a checklist in place before you sell your drone to make sure that you've done the things that you should do to sanitize whatever Android tablet or GCS you were using or Windows laptop, and the drone itself. What have you done to make sure that there's no sensitive information there? Interoperability and integration issues, another favorite. So integrating various systems and technologies without a cohesive security strategy can introduce vulnerabilities. So we see this in healthcare. So it's hardly a month goes by without a huge healthcare hack. And it's not typically the big companies, it's whatever the vendors are behind them. So what's happening with where your data is going? So are you integrating with a back-end system? So drone logbook, not to pick on them, but just an example, or AirMap back in the day. So where are you sending your data? As you're sending it across the network, is it still secure? So design and implement a secure integration framework, conduct security assessments of all the integrated systems, whether they're your own internal systems or whether they're third-party systems too as well. Oh, and here we go again, third-party services and API security. So external APIs used by drones or GCS might be insecure, providing a pathway for attacks. Securely configure and regularly monitor all external APIs. Ensure API security practice in place, including authentication, throttling, and encryption. So, a lot of this stuff, we're kind of getting into DevOps at this stage. So we would be using a CI/CD server, maybe something like Postman, to be testing whatever the third-party services are, whatever external APIs that we're talking to make sure that nothing's changed, so that we have enough tests in there to make sure that they're still acting in a secure way. Getting towards the end, user error and misconfiguration. So incorrect configuration of drone systems by users can expose them to risks of unauthorized access or malfunction. So if everybody's using the same password for the drones, so an employee leaves and then takes that password with them, so at a later stage they can come back in and gain access to drones because you're still using the same username and password. Provide comprehensive training for users, implement configuration management tools, and conduct regular audits of system configurations. This gets back to are you using the default passwords that come with whatever piece of hardware you have? Are you using the default passwords for the drones? Are you using default passwords for the cameras or whatever the sensors are there? Make sure that as much as possible that you're manually or in an automated fashion changing those username and passwords so that you don't allow users to gain access to the drone. And also there's misconfiguration, maybe that, just the silly things like the newbie mistake that we always have is that the propellers go on certain engines. So they're paired 2 and 2. So if they're not paired correctly, the newbie mistake is the drone's just going to fall over because it's not going to work. So that's just an example of a misconfiguration. There's plenty others just with lack of experience. Environmental hazards. So drones operating in complex environments may encounter situations can be exploited to cause physical or functional failures. So use environmental sensing techniques to detect and respond to hazards, implement robust fail-safe and recovery procedures. Kind of getting the weeds here a little bit, but basically what it's saying, if you're flying in somewhere which got an environmental hazard, that you want to make sure that you've got a sensor, a methane sensor or something that's recognizing that, or a thermal sensor that's recognizing that you shouldn't really be flying across to where the fire is. And then this is the last one. So we have, this would be AI and autonomous decision-making vulnerabilities. So a lot of the drones that we work on these days, we're creating autonomous flights. So basically we're uploading whatever the flight is to fly over solar panels, fly across a field, agricultural field, fly around a cell phone tower. So that's one area. So there may be a way. Oh, here's Nick coming in now, just at the end. There may be a way for people to bypass whatever you have and send it, give it a different WPML file, a mission planning file. And also we were doing, haven't done much recently, but we were doing quite a bit of machine learning object detection. And that's using a lot of training data. So the training data for counting cattle, counting sheep, or whatever it is. So a lot of people will basically just trust the machine now. They won't validate. They'll just assume that the machine has been counting the cattle for so long now that we know it's perfect. Where if you just do some quick manual checks, you can see that actually it's not really counting the cattle, it's counting everything. And you're getting incorrect numbers. So you got to do all the way to go back to where the training data is to make sure that the training data that it was trained on for its labeling, for its machine learning is correct. And then implement different layers of validation before autonomous actions are taken, monitor the AI systems for signs of manipulation. Lots of different examples where AI, machine learning, object detection has fallen apart. Certainly lots of examples in, not drone examples, but there's lots of examples in the greater Detroit area where a couple of people were arrested and because they were using a system which matched the video footage to the Michigan licenses. And the most recent one was they tried to arrest a woman and they realized it wasn't her because she was 8 months pregnant and the person that they saw in the video wasn't pregnant at all, which just happened a couple of days ago. So don't trust the machine, trust, but verify, I guess, is the answer here. And then I did see Nick just walked in, so I'm going to give you a thing. So Nick is going to be doing, continuing on where we're doing with drone security. So he has this cool damn vulnerable drone simulator that I'm hoping that we're going to be talking about next week, because one of the things that I really like about the OWASP, go back to this, share this tab. So they have these crack me's, which are basically teach you how to, at different levels, to crack Android apps, to follow the different things in the checklist, to see if you can, if you can understand how to gain access to the different areas. And then they have some iOS ones too as well, but definitely on the Android side, there's just so much more open than it is for reverse engineering than it is on the other side. Okay, so I'm almost up in the hour. Does anybody have any questions or any comments or any suggestions on how I can improve this? Because one of the things I do want to do is not miss anything obvious that I may have missed. Okay. Evangelos, did I say your name properly? You got a question? Go for it.
Absolutely fun. So when we're referring to the top 10, shall the focus be on the whole UAS as an effort? Because what you presented was a big list. When we want to narrow it down, shall we focus on solutions or proposals that apply to as many as possible components of the UAS?
I think what happens is when I started doing this first, that the OWASP folks said that they wanted to do a drone top 10. And so that would be the similar as the web top 10 and the mobile top 10 that we talked about. But since then, that's kind of changed, because when it went up the, up the levels of people in OWASP, they said, well, we think this might be a cheat sheet. So if it's cheat sheet, I am not restricted to 10, so we can put in anything we want. So I will, just walking through this, it's pretty obvious to me that some of them have a bit too much overlap. So I'll probably knock it down to 20. But what I don't want to do is miss anything in the ecosystem that should be in here. So I don't think I'm gonna narrow it to 10 now because we're doing this cheat sheet instead of, you know, the top 10 risks that was there before. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's even better actually.
Yeah. So if you've got anything, you know, either pipe up now or, you know, put a message and yeah, Nick, the slides will be available online. I will put them online. And also the video is, we put that up as well. Brian, you got a question?
It was just kind of questions, kind of comment question. One thing that I don't even know if you want to include this, but it might be missing is, you know, if you do DJI development, you're passing the DJI information. So
yep. Yeah. So if we use a DJI SDK, the DJI SDK is calling home. Yes. But
yeah, and you know, there's an assumption that that's okay on some level, but of course we know, like in the case of DJI, it might not. We don't know if it's okay or not, to be honest.
Yep.
I don't know if that's something you want to include or not. I mean, I don't want to be political or don't want to be, you know, can we?
Yeah,
you know?
I think, I think in one case I will say that because, like I said, when we're going through making sure that you get your software from a secure place, I think downloading the DJI apps from outside of the Google Play Store is not secure. So, and then the second part of that is just what you mentioned, is that if you're using an SDK and you can't put your app up on, well, you can now really, you can put your app up on the App Store. You just have to make sure that you strip 2 or 3 of the libraries. But Google Play will accept it. So at least it's in Google Play. But yeah, there should be some mention somewhere of be careful about where your data is going, because I don't know if from the SDK, I have no guarantee that the data is not going.
I mean, you register your keys.
Yep.
So there's a way for them to look. I mean, if they care, if there's someone looking, there's a way for them to look back at how you're using it.
Yeah, there is. But there's also other options if you don't want to use DJI. So, you know, you can use Parrot, for example. They have an SDK, ground SDK, that's cool. Mm-hmm. Or you can use the Mavlink SDK on a lot of the drones, the USA drones that are out there. Right. So that's
I was just bringing that up of whether you should include that. You know,
yeah,
you want to be everything, whether you should include that or not.
It's such a knife edge, really, because if I start, you know, if I start to go down that route, it's just going to become a DJI bashing zone, and that's not really what I'm after. What I'm after is, right, if I'm a new developer who comes in, what are the risks? So you are right that a risk is that if you use the DJI SDK, that you've no guarantee that the information's not going back home, ET phone home. But there are other options that you can use, and you still need to know what the security issues are with the other options. So if you're using a Parrot drone or a Mav SDK, or even Q ground control, what do you have to be able to check to make sure that the information is secure? Yeah, and it basically, you could spend the whole hour just talking about DJI, and I don't think that's productive. I think people are doing it all the time, and
I wasn't necessarily recommending it.
Yeah.
I figure I just.
Yeah, it's well worth bringing up, Brian. I 100% agree, but it's just difficult.
Yeah. People were worried about Microsoft at one point.
Well, yeah, because Microsoft were basically recording everything. So,
yeah.
And then, it's like, if you don't think that it's a different level, but if you don't think that your phone isn't watching your Facebook or whatever else, obviously TikTok, so that's another one that we could spend an hour talking about. Yeah. But there's, there are definitely issues. Like, I uninstall things on a regular basis just because I don't use them very often. I don't want them listening or tracking me or whatever they want. That's the whole reason why when you use a website, the website says, please install this app. The reason they're installing the app is because the web blockers work really well. So they want you to install the app because there's nothing to block them tracking you if they're using a mobile app.
That's right.
Eric, you had a question?
Yeah, just around number 10 about the logging and monitoring. I think you mentioned having logging and monitoring so you can tell when things are going wrong. I mean, it also ties into like 11 and 16 too, right? About securing your data store. And not just that, but like what are you
What are you doing
logging,
with your
you may
monitoring?
need
Yeah, what?
you may need to scrub that data. Like if it's got
Yep.
GPS data or
Yep.
personal data in there, you may need to purge that or make sure it's encrypted at rest, just like everything else.
Agreed. And also, if you are logging, who's actually looking at it? Is anybody using Elasticsearch or something else to set up alerts for whatever it is that you're trying to track? Yep, I hear you. Anything else? Nick, what day? Did you figure out what day you want to do next month?
Hey, Godfrey. No,
What works for you?
I'm pretty flexible. So let
Okay,
me know.
so if we say May 8th, will that work?
Let me check.
While he's doing that. Evangelos, you had one more question.
Yeah, it's just logistics. By when do you expect the final comments?
I don't know. I have to. We're gonna have the panel next week, so that's like, so the whole of next week I'll be in San Diego at the conference. So the week after that, I'll put everything together, and then I'll post it to the group if anyone wants to comment after we're done. I think that's a good way of approaching it because we have almost 500 members. So I'll post it to the group and see if anybody has anything and give like 2-3 weeks, and then I'll send it to OWASP after that. So basically by the end of May. Oh, so May 8th doesn't work. So what about the 13th? Is that what we said? Okay. 13th or the 15th, Nick?
Let's do 13th.
Woohoo! Okay, great. Okay, so Nick is doing his drone security simulator, and honestly, I can't wait. Because I think that's really cool. I want to see how that works and how that's put together on the 13th of May, and that'll be in the next talk. Anything else before I close it up? I will put the. Oh yeah, I did see attacks. Yeah, when I was going through, I was like, okay, that's yeah.
Yeah, I'm over here Googling going, is that just some term I don't know?
No, it's not. It's a typo. Yeah, that's my bad. I will put the slides up first thing in the morning with the typo corrected. And then Mike, when his video is done, we'll put it up. And I'll post the paper too as well that we're presenting to Exponential. And it's great actually. This is the first time that they wanted something a bit more technical because they tend to be much more to the business level. So I'm glad that they actually gave the opportunity to do it this time. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. See you
Very
next month.
good.